Thank you very much, and thank my honourable colleague, the Leader of the NDP, for raising this issue as well. I rise today to discuss the emergency in the lives of 3,000 Brampton area families who got the news that one day after the Prime Minister's meeting with the President of the United States that their factory would be moving to the U.S. For these families, it is not just an emergency, it is a tragedy. They ask how they are going to pay their bills, feed their families, whether they might have to uproot their kids from their schools and hockey teams to move to a faraway place just to put food on the table, Mr. Speaker.
You could almost feel the silence in Brampton that morning, that kind of silence that follows bad news. Not the ordinary kind. The kind that comes when 3,000 families find out that their future just got sold to another country. No warning. No transition plan. Just a press release and a handshake that happened somewhere between Ottawa and Washington. Only one day after the Prime Minister met with the President of the United States, the announcement dropped. The auto plant that had been the lifeline of Brampton for decades was moving south of the border. 3,000 jobs gone. 3,000 families suddenly staring at bills, mortgages, and questions no one wants to ask out loud. What do we do now? Do we sell the house? Do we pull the kids out of school? And while politicians argue over statistics and strategy, real people are sitting at kitchen tables trying to figure out how to keep their lights on. This isn't just another corporate relocation. It's a symptom of something deeper, something breaking at the core of Canada's economy. Because let's be real, this didn't happen overnight. The writing has been on the wall for years. Factories closing. Investments drying up. And a government that promised to protect jobs somehow managed to preside over the loss of 100,000 of them. Let that sink in. 100,000 livelihoods erased while speeches were made about building a better future. And the irony. The company moving these jobs to the U.S. was one of those that received billions, $15 billion of taxpayer money. That's right. Canadian families who can't even afford groceries right now were forced to fund the very company that's packing up and leaving them behind. $15 billion. That's nearly $1,000 for every family in this country. Paid out of their pockets to ship their jobs out.
Before moving forward, do subscribe for Parliament updates.
Thank you for the
Tell
question.
Me, how
before
is that
I
not a
get into
betrayal?
that, let me just
Because
say
this
that
isn't just
our
about
thoughts are
Brampton.
with the
It's
incredible
Oshawa all over again.
Brampton-based Stellantis
Windsor,
workers
Oakville,
and the countless Canadian
one after another, the
forestry
manufacturing
workers
heartbeat of Canada is being
who've all
hollowed
been
out,
betrayed
and
by
no
Mark
one in power
Carney's
seems to
broken
have the courage to
promises
stop
on
it.
trade. He promised
The Prime Minister stood
put his
before
elbows
cameras
up,
promising jobs,
handle
investment,
Trump,
growth.
negotiate a win, and have a deal by
$54
July
billion
21st.
in net
Still no
investment
deal.
has fled Canada.
Still no win.
That's not a policy
Still
failure.
no elbows.
That's a crisis of
and
confidence.
the only thing that's up
Investors
are American
walking
tariffs
away.
on Canada.
Companies are leaving.
Since the Prime Minister took
and
office.
families are paying the price.
After his humiliating
But it's
meeting
not
in
just
the White
economics,
House last week,
it's the
the
human
President
cost that hits hardest.
sensed weakness in Mark
Imagine
Carney
being a parent who's spent
and
20
decided
years on the
to
line,
have his
proud to build
Commerce
something
Secretary
tangible,
announce
real,
that
something
the
that
auto
used to mean
tariffs
stability.
would be permanent,
and
and
then,
to jack
overnight,
up
you're told
lumber
it's
tariffs
gone.
another 10%.
You go home that
Mark
evening and sit
Carney's
across from your
broken
kids,
promises
who ask,
and weakness
Dad,
abroad
are we still going to my hockey
are
games
costing
next season?
Canadian workers
You
at
don't
home.
have the heart to tell them
I'm
you
calling
don't
on
even
Mark
know
Carney
if you'll
again.
still be living in the same
Keep
city.
your word.
That's
you
what
promised
this crisis
you
looks
would
like up
negotiate a
close.
win and get us a deal
Not
by
numbers.
July 21st. Those
Not
lumber and
charts.
auto workers
But
and
human
the workers
beings in
behind
free
me
fall.
today are counting on
And
Mark
yet,
Carney
in
to keep
Ottawa,
his promise
the story's
and to do
being
it
spun as
now.
market shifts and global competitiveness. No accountability. No urgency. The truth is, Canada is now the fastest shrinking economy in the G7. Let that phrase hit you, not slower growth, not temporary dip. Shrinking. While others are adapting, building, and attracting industry, we're losing ground at home. And it's not because Canadians don't work hard. It's not because we don't innovate. It's because the people making the decisions seem more interested in optics than outcomes. You can't lecture about protecting Canadian jobs while handing billions to multinational corporations that turn around and move those jobs to Ohio or Michigan. That's not strategy, that's self-sabotage.
100,000 more people are unemployed since when this Prime Minister took office, promising to protect jobs. $54 billion of net investment has fled since he was elected, promising to bring investment back to this country. And our economy is the fastest shrinking in the G7. These statistics might seem like they're just interesting to the economists and the accountants, but, Mr. Speaker, in fact, they are human lives that are at stake. This is particularly important to Canadian taxpayers, but because the federal government has contributed $15 billion tax dollars to the company that's now moving these jobs, that works out to almost $1,000 for every single family in Canada. Families that cannot afford groceries or homes are paying to subsidize the export of our jobs to the United States of America.
This isn't just about economics, it's about dignity. About what kind of country we want to be. Because when a government fails to protect its workers, when it subsidizes their own displacement, when it turns national pride into corporate payouts, something fundamental breaks. And maybe that's what people are starting to feel now, not just frustration but betrayal. You can sense it everywhere, in the grocery aisles, on construction sites, in classrooms. Canadians are working harder than ever but falling further behind. Prices are up, wages are stagnant, and the promise that hard work equals security feels like a fading myth. The Brampton factory might be the latest casualty, but it's not the last. Not unless something changes. The government can talk about transitioning all it wants, but you can't transition 3,000 workers into thin air. These are people with families, mortgages, and roots, not numbers on a spreadsheet. And so, the call for an emergency debate in Parliament isn't political theatre. It's a cry for help, a demand that someone finally treat this as the emergency it is. Because when 3,000 jobs disappear in one city, it's not just an industrial story. It's a national one. And if Ottawa doesn't wake up now, the next announcement might make this look small. You see, the collapse of the Brampton plant isn't an isolated tragedy, it's a warning flare shot into the night sky. A message saying, if this can happen here, it can happen anywhere. The problem isn't just a single factory moving to the United States. It's the pattern behind it, one we've been watching unfold for years, one announcement at a time, each one greeted by the same tired phrases from those in charge. Global market shifts. Necessary restructuring. Economic adjustments. Words meant to dull the pain, to convince Canadians this is just how the world works now. But it doesn't have to be. Canada used to be a country that built things, real things. From auto plants in Ontario to shipyards in Halifax, to steel mills that lit up the night skies. Those jobs weren't just paychecks. They were identities. They were what held communities together. But somewhere along the way, we started trading that real economy for something fragile, numbers on a screen, imported products, and the illusion of growth built on debt and corporate subsidies. We've reached a point where the government celebrates investment attraction, while investment itself is fleeing the country, $54 billion gone since the Prime Minister took office. Gone to places that value productivity over politics, and competition over carbon taxes. And what do we get in return? Speeches. Grants. Headlines about green transitions and inclusive economies. But ask any worker in Brampton tonight how inclusive it feels to lose your job to an American factory funded by your own tax dollars. Because that's the ultimate insult here, Canadians paid for this betrayal. $15 billion in federal contributions, meant to protect and grow industry, handed over to a company that used that money to pack its bags. Imagine telling that to a single mom in Mississauga working double shifts to keep up with rent. Imagine explaining to her that the taxes she pays, money she desperately needs, just help ship thousands of jobs out of her province. That's not leadership. That's abandonment dressed as policy. And yet, what's the official response? A carefully worded statement about working closely with partners. A few lines about future opportunities. No accountability. No urgency. You can feel the disconnection between Ottawa and the people who actually make this country run. It's like two different realities, one where politicians talk about innovation, and another where families are selling their cars to pay the bills. And that gap, that widening divide, is the real danger. Because when people lose faith in their leaders, when they stop believing the system will protect them, something begins to shift in the national psyche. You can see it now, frustration boiling under the surface, communities starting to turn inward, trust breaking apart thread by thread. This isn't just about jobs anymore. It's about whether Canadians still believe their government is on their side. Look around, small businesses closing, inflation chewing through paychecks, young Canadians giving up on the dream of owning a home. Meanwhile, those at the top talk about resilience, as if ordinary people haven't been living it every day. And the cruel irony. Canada isn't out of ideas. It's out of leadership. We have the talent, the resources, the work ethic. What we don't have is a government that knows how to turn those things into prosperity, for everyone, not just for the boardrooms and donors. You can feel the shift happening. Canadians are starting to realize the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed, just not for them. So when the Speaker in Parliament stood up and asked for an emergency debate, he wasn't just fighting for 3,000 auto workers. He was fighting for the idea that Canadian labor, Canadian talent, and Canadian families still matter. That this country shouldn't quietly accept decline as destiny. And if Parliament has any shred of conscience left, it should grant that debate. It should face the uncomfortable truth head-on, that this country's economic foundation is cracking, and the cost isn't measured in GDP points, but in people's lives. Because if we ignore this moment, if we shrug off 3,000 lost jobs like they're just another headline, we're not just losing factories. We're losing faith. Faith that hard work pays off. Faith that the next generation will have it better. Faith that Canada still takes care of its own. That's what's really at stake. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment that wakes people up. Because every time a plant shuts down, a town dims a little. But every time people stand up, demand answers, refuse to stay silent, the country brightens again. Canadians are not powerless. They've just been too patient for too long. The families in Brampton deserve more than sympathy. They deserve justice, the kind that holds decision-makers accountable for where the money goes, and what promises were broken. They deserve a government that sees a factory closure not as an economic adjustment but as a national alarm bell. Because this, all of this, is a test of who we are. Whether we accept decline or fight to rebuild. Whether we keep handing out billions to foreign corporations, or finally start investing in our own people. And that choice belongs to us. Not to the boardrooms. Not to the consultants. To us. So if you're watching this tonight, wherever you are, remember this moment. Because this story in Brampton isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of a reckoning. Canadians are waking up. They're tired of being told to tighten their belts while billion-dollar bailouts keep flowing. They're tired of seeing their kids struggle harder for less. They're tired of watching the country they built being quietly hollowed out. Something is shifting, you can feel it. The next election, the next movement, the next conversation, it all starts with one simple truth. We don't owe our loyalty to failed leadership. We owe it to each other. Because this country was built by ordinary people who refused to give up when times got tough, and it'll be rebuilt by those same people, standing together again. So to every worker in Brampton tonight, every family sitting in uncertainty, every Canadian who feels forgotten, you're not alone. Your struggle is our story. And this time, the nation is listening.
Canada debates.